It happened one night when he was babysitting his sister's kids.
About an hour after they leave, I hear a baby crying coming from the children's bedroom where the kids were. So I walked to the room to check up on the girls, and as I approached the room, the crying sound got quieter. And when I reached out to grab the doorknob, it had stopped altogether. So I went back into the living room, and while I was waiting, I realized those kids are 6 and 9. They don't make the sound of a baby crying.
When his sister and her husband came home, Kevin asked them if the neighbors had a baby.
Both of their faces instantly blanched white. They told me at that time that they got a great deal on the house. They'd bought it like a month and a half before. The house was haunted, and that they were in the process of selling the house.
Kevin Burns says he has a background in science, and he doesn't really believe in ghosts. But the look on his sister's face gave him the willies. So, babies crying, phantom knockings, haunted houses. For some perspective on the paranormal, we spoke with Toke Thompson. He's a professor at the University of Southern California, where he teaches a class on ghost stories. I asked him how we balance our natural skepticism with the unexplained.
You know, ghost stories are one of those things that have never been proven, but have also never been disproven. And, you know, most Americans believe in ghosts. At least from the surveys that I've seen, it usually comes in at over 50%. So that's fascinating because most Americans tend to believe in science. And even those who might not believe in certain aspects of science, say evolution or whatnot, tend to be influenced by their religious teachings. Well, here's a case example where most Americans believe something that both their science and their religious leaders tell them not to believe.
Okay, moving to another story, this one from Ryan McMichael. He was visiting Vietnam with his wife, whose family lived there. And one night, this kind of ghostly figure shook him awake and pointed him to the bathroom.
I thought maybe it was one of my wife's cousins had come in and woken me up. But first of all, it was 3 a.m. Second of all, why would they do that?
So when he told his wife's family the story the next morning, they were pretty blasé. You know, they told him it was probably Grandpa's ghost just there to help him. Is that a common theme you have found, this kind of idea of a helpful ghost?
Sure, helpful ghosts are pretty common, especially when they're family ghosts. And also, let me say this, I noticed that the story that you just told took place in Vietnam. And you know, ghost belief in the United States is somewhere over 50%, but in a lot of East Asian countries, it's quite a bit higher, like well over 90 or well over 95%. So this is not only an acceptable belief, but it's sort of unacceptable not to believe in ghosts in a lot of these countries.
Okay, last story. This one from Thomas Atkins, and his is especially creepy. So here's how it goes. He and his mom were visited many times by a Patty Playpal doll who would walk around the house opening and shutting doors and flicking lights on and off.
I would be in my top bunk, and I would hear, in the middle of the night, these footsteps coming, and I would hear the thunk, thunk up the ladder at the foot of my bed, and I would see this doll's bangs and then her eyes peer over the edge of my bed and be so terrified that I couldn't even get a scream out.
That is horrifying.
That's spooky. Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
Oh, man. There are lots of stories of possessed dolls. It's hard not to conjure up images of Chucky. But is this something you've seen a lot in ghost stories and family ghost stories, this idea of possessed dolls?
Possessed dolls, yeah, it does show up a lot. In fact, the word doll actually comes from the root word idol. So this idea of possessing a spirit to some degree is at the root of dolls.
Is there value in ghost stories, especially the kind that travel from generation to generation?
Well, I think if there wasn't value in them, people wouldn't keep telling them. Frankly, I think that ghost stories deal with a lot of issues, not just whether or not one believes in ghosts, but also questions of the past that haunts us, perhaps past injustices that haven't been taken care of. So, for instance, in America, we find the common theme of building on top of an Indian burial ground, and that haunts the owners, very, very common. Well, that speaks somewhat to America's history of the destruction of Native American peoples and societies that maybe hasn't quite been dealt with. Or, again, we have a lot of ghosts of slavery. So there's a lot of, I think, social and even moral messages that can come from ghost stories.